Hi, I'm Geraldine Glass, and welcome to the Sacred Science of Sound. I am excited and thrilled and honored to have Eileen McKusick with us today. Eileen is an expert in tuning the human biofield. Eileen has written a wonderful book, Tuning the Human Biofield, and she's an expert in exploring this whole new field with the tuning forks that she is working with, and I'm delighted that she'll be sharing that with us. I met Eileen on a referral from a dear friend, and Eileen worked with me at the beginning of my grieving experience after losing my son, and it was very profound what happened in the session. I was amazed also how she could feel exactly the places where in my body the grief was manifesting. So I'm excited to share a deeper conversation with her, with our viewers. So welcome, Eileen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I am very curious to start the conversation with, how did you begin to explore and to begin to map the human biofield?
Well, I started using tuning forks in 1996, and I used them kind of as a hobby, sort of right over the body, for about 10 years. And, you know, it was a little weird using tuning forks back in the 90s. Like, you know, it's still weird now, but it was really weird back then, especially in Connecticut where I was. And then I moved to Vermont, and I did it, but I just did it part-time. But one day I was working with somebody and had a really interesting breakthrough that opened up the field to me, because I'd just been kind of exploring around the body, and I've made a bunch of interesting discoveries just doing that. But, you know, not enough to change my vocation. At the time I'd been involved in food and restaurant and specialty food, and that was my vocation. And after I made this discovery that there was actually kind of stuff going on in the atmosphere around the body, and that stuff going on, you know, had kind of a whole life and world of its own. Mm-hmm. And I started to explore it. It was like this sort of, you know, territory hidden in plain view. And what the tuning forks did was they gave me an opportunity to basically use sonar, you know, and bounce the sound off of the area, you know, as far as I could go in my room, and listen and feel into the signal that came back. And over, you know, the course of a number of years, I discovered a pattern, and it was a surprising pattern to discover. And that became the basis of what we call the biofield anatomy map. And it's the system that we work with in biofield tuning, which is basically like, just like they've mapped the brain, I've mapped this field, you know, this hypothetical toroidal field that surrounds and penetrates the human body. And I've really come to see it as what we call mind. And it's where all our memories are stored. You know, memories aren't just in here, in the brain, or even in like muscles, but also, excuse me, in the larger, what seems to be electromagnetic field of the body. And I've discovered all kinds of really interesting anatomical features, and especially how, you know, in this model, our body is inside our mind rather than the other way around. And we come to see, you know, all disease, all instances of where the body begins to break down, as beginning in the field, and as often relating to traumatic experiences, to habitual frames of mind that are out of balance and, you know, out of rhythm. And so what we do is we actually treat the mind. And the tuning forks, for me, there's a scene in the Helen Keller movie where she's having her hands run underwater coming out of a well, and makes the connection, you know, of the word and the sound and the feeling of water, and how that opened up the door to her to kind of begin to explore and understand life better. And so I often think of that, you know, my experience in sounding the field has been very much a kind of like blind discovery of all of these different patterns and textures and rhythms that are actually present there, and they all tell a story. And so so I've been working with that between, I think, around 2005 and around 2010 is when I really kind of put together that whole map. And then I started teaching it in 2010. I had a group of clients who pretty much bullied me into starting to teach them. And I was really reluctant to teach this map because it was one person's subjective experience. And I didn't feel like it was something that I really could teach, but they were like, well, let's learn it anyway. And so what they found was the same things that I found when working with this map. So specifically what the map reveals is that our field is that we're kind of like rings in a tree. And as we go through our day and we experience different feelings, different emotions, different thoughts, different inputs, we're constantly having a vibrational response to all that input, and that response gets encoded in our nervous system, in our memory, never goes away. And what it seems to do is populate our biofield with just, expanding rings of information. And what I found was that if I was encountering information or stories, I seem to have this weird ability to have the fork in a dissonant area because it's interplaying with the information that's there. And just kind of know what it was. And it's through that weird kind of knowing that I was able to recognize and map all these patterns. But when the fork is held there, it reveals all of the information that is encoded, and it's a language that you learn over time, and my practitioners learn it too. So for example, if somebody is 60 and their field extends about 6 feet on either side of them, kind of around them, sort of within this magnetic bubble. I will find information about 3 feet away from their body that was generated when they were 30 years of age. Mm-hmm. I'll find information at the very outer edge of the field that was generated in conception and gestation and then birth. And then information close to the body is sort of habits of mind and more recent experiences. And also the sounds of different organs, because every organ has its kind of right rhythm and right sound. And when we're healthy, it's like we have this inner orchestra that is all playing together. They've got the same sheet music. We're kind of in a groovy or flow kind of state. And what happens in life is we take all these hits that kind of knock us out of tune and out of balance and off rhythm. And, and our bodies start to fail because of that. And our lives reflect that chaos and dissonance as well. So working with the tuning forks that has literally, helped me to get in tune, and people I've trained, and, we've trained over 1,400 people worldwide in at least one stage of the practice. So it's really spreading. We talk about creating coherent emitters and people who are, giving off coherent, balanced, in tune vibes. And bringing that into the world. We see that the world is really just kind of, there's a lot of noise in the signal, but what tuning forks reveal is that there is harmony underneath and that it's in everyone. And, that's the kind of essence of what I discovered, working in the field, finding that it's noise, finding that it's stuck energy, finding that it's dissonant memories, and then harmonizing that and helping the energy that's been trapped in that kind of struggle to just release and go into circulation. And, and then people's voltage goes up, their energy, their brightness, and their ability to affect the world really increases.
I found it so fascinating, like when we were working together, that the tuning fork really you could hear a special kind of dissonance, let's say when there was fear in my field or when there was deep grief in my field, that you explained to me that the tuning fork showed you. And I'm so curious about that, about the different emotions and the different sounds that you experience with the forks, and your keen sense of hearing, your keen sense of understanding what do those distorted, dissonant sounds from the fork mean.
Yeah, that's one of the really intriguing parts of this work is that, just like music seeks to evoke particular emotions, it's easy to see like where that it comes from our own tonal expression. So for example, when you feel fear, that gets reflected in the tuning forks. We hear it in the overtones, the undertones of the fork. It's a live interaction of waveforms intersecting. And even though, what's coming out of the body is very, very low amplitude and very, very high frequency, it still translates into the sound of the tuning fork. And, you know, when you get really scared, you start to shake. And that is the waveform of fear, is like this pulsing quality. You know, and you think about the soundtrack to Jaws and the kind of pulsing quality, right? That's evoking that emotional waveform in your body. Sadness, you know, it lives in a very specific area. What I discovered was that every emotion seemed to have a tonal expression. Like depression sounds, it's got an undertone. There's all different kinds of expressions of sadness. You know, there's melancholy and wailing and keening and deep grief. I mean, there's so many different expressions of sadness. And I can, and people learn to over time, perceive these nuances of expression and resonate in their own body what that feeling is. Because this is, you know, we all feel in this language of vibration, even though we put words and labels on it. It's really just a resonance. And so when we're empathetic, we resonate with a person's pain, or, you know, whatever their discordant energy is in that moment. So, you know, but the thing is that people tend to assume that that I have like special hearing abilities, and it's actually quite the contrary. When I was 20, I got very kind of clear direction from source, just from my own inner guidance, that I needed to learn how to sing. And I had a lot of trauma around my voice. And actually, I spent, over the course of 7 years, I had 7 different voice teachers. And the first 5 told me that I was tone deaf and that I would never be able to sing. Like, it was like a life sentence of tone deafness, that I couldn't match pitch. I just couldn't hear the tones. But I'm stubborn. And so I kept going. And what I discovered was that I had a lot of tension in my body from my childhood. And that, in fact, I was tickled a lot. I had 5 older siblings, and I was really tickled a lot. And so what I had discovered from body work was that my kidneys had actually tucked up, like inside my rib cage. So my kidneys, instead of being down, were like tucked up like this. In Chinese medicine, your kidneys connect to your ears. And so I got body work. I started getting Rolfed. I started doing yoga, and I started to release the tension that was in my body and start to relax. And when I was able to do that, I was able to hear distinctions more. So the more relaxed you are, the more quiet you are inside, the more able you are to pick up these subtle nuances of sound. And the more you practice, the more you pick up. So it's, you know, it's something that really anybody can do. If I can do it and I was tone deaf, then anybody can do it. But you need to pay attention. You need to be curious. You know, you need to care truly about what you're encountering, because everybody I've ever worked on has gone through, I mean, amazingly wild and difficult and horrible things. And, you know, you wonder how people function with what they've been through. Because, and, you know, my mom used to say, into every life some rain must fall, and it does. And in some lives it falls very hard. And, you know, we should never judge anybody because we really don't know what they've been through. So, you know, it's been really humbling to me to have my hand in so many people's minds and hearts and feelings. You know, I've really seen so much tragedy, but also so much triumph and the overcoming of the human spirit. And also this, you know, again, this sort of underlying harmony that when we take the sharps and the flats and the static and the unwitnessed stories out of the tonal equation, it flows into this beautiful harmony in everybody. You know, that's just magnificent to see.
I know it's fascinating to me because as you describe the tuning forks, I'm also, as a professor of voice, I'm working with actually fine-tuning their human instrument. And so there is an ability of hearing where a resonance is missing, hearing where a harmonic is missing, feeling a place in the body, like you were describing the kidneys that have been shut down or inverted, introverted, you know, like that, or blockages. And then being able to coax them and tune them and bring them with loving care out so that the person resonates, as you're discussing, in true harmony, in a true balanced whole manner. And that's the goal. And I think sound And sound has such a way to uncover that. And I'm sorry that few people said tone deaf, because that is just, there is always a way to teach people to find their voice and to find that joy in making their own sound and in opening their voice and singing.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, out there are like me, who got traumatized by, music teachers and peers and got their voice shut down. I think that that's a big part of the population these days. And I think that, that a big part of healing is claiming your ability to sing, to be a resonant, harmonious, tonal being, and the joy and the health and the togetherness as well that gets expressed through that. It's really good medicine.
It's amazing medicine, and it does. It brings so much joy to find your core and your center through your own vibrational sound. I'm curious, Eileen, will you share with us some of the results that you've experienced? So how have you experienced the work that you're doing? What kind of results do people receive, and how is that then sustainable? How do you experience that? Because it's profound, the work you're doing, and I'm so excited that I myself experienced it and that you can share it with our viewers.
Yeah. So, it works on a lot of different levels. I mean, what's cool about the tuning forks, because they technically produce an infinite number of overtones and undertones. So they're producing just such a broad spectrum of sound. They're doing a lot of work with like transcranial ultrasound and stuff, but they're really missing the whole audible range, which also has a tremendous amount of value. And so what it does is it works on the physical level, the emotional, the mental, the ancestral. We've been doing a lot of work with ancestral energy lately. It really works in so many different ways. And so we see all kinds of results with people. If you think about something like anxiety, that's just a rhythm, a pattern kind of going in the body. And we can find it. We can find where it is in the field and reflect that dissonant expression back to the body. It's a kind of biofeedback. Mm-hmm. And then the body kind of hears its own noise. It senses its own distortion, and it uses the steady input of the tuning forks. It's almost like a metronome. It's just like a steady input to adjust itself, to tune itself, and to take the noise out of its own signal. And so this, waveform that's doing that will just kind of settle down, and the person will have the experience of that energy settling down. And really any emotion, it's kind of just noise in the signal. It's flat, it's sharp, it's stuck. And so as we gently interface with these areas of dissonance, they resolve. And especially in areas where there's a lot of energy trapped, like if somebody had a sudden trauma or a car accident, or, it's almost like there's tangles in their fields that are trapping energy. Somebody grew up in an abusive environment, there's lots of energy trapped and frozen in their field, and their breath is very frozen, their muscles are very locked. And so this process goes in and it untangles those tangles, and it liberates the energy that has been sequestered there, and it introduces it back into flow. And what it does is, everybody's got like a battery meter, because we're really essentially electric beings. And, it's something we don't really think about because we've been so taught to think of ourselves chemically and mechanically. We're also electric, the plasma, the fire element in our body. Our brain waves are electric, our heart is electric, our bones are electric, our blood is electric. And we're basically, we're a bag of seawater with an electric charge. And as such, we have a battery meter. And so I always ask people, on a scale of 1 to 100, where is your battery meter at right now? And people always know. It's really interesting. And then I say, what are 3 things you could be doing right now to start to raise your battery meter? And people always know, which is so interesting to me, right? Did those things pop into your head?
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to when we had our session and how it just felt like there was a calmness that came into the field. And I know that when I saw you at the beginning stages of grief, I was very much in just panic, anxiety, disbelief, shock, and could physically feel a calming of those vibrations. But I'm just curious for our viewers also, and for me, it has continued to grow, continue to stay balanced. I often will say to my students, you know, I mean, I understand that it's important. They can't take me with them on the stage, and it's important that we learn how to ground and embody all the things that we are learning. So how do we breathe that into our system and land it so that it becomes sustainable for us to keep continuing, like in the energetics of the tuning forks?
Yeah. So, well, part of it is getting our own voltage up, right? So that's what this work does, is that as we receive this work, but there's other ways to do it too, and I'll talk about that. The energy that's trapped goes back into our system, and it starts to raise our battery meter up. And so when our body has enough voltage, when it has enough energy running through the system, it maintains order much more easily. So part of, you know, what I feel my work does is it starts to retrain the mind, retrain the energy body as these bits of potential get liberated and sent back into circulation. We ultimately come to a place of what I call riding the dragon, which is just being really present with every emotion as it arises, being very present with life, and, you know, saying yes and being curious whatever arises. And we start to surf the now, like we become a better sailor. We're able to have a deep keel and to a deep sense of equanimity. You know, it's a practice. I mean, biofield tuning can help release the tangles, kind of get your meter back up, kind of settle the noise. But ultimately, it's up to you, you know, to learn how to manage, to recognize, to understand, and start to manage your own energy body. You know, how much are you discharging? How much are you recharging? Are you buying into drama? Are you feeding drama? You know, that are you believing in struggle? Like all of these habits of mind that were kind of programmed into us by how we grew up. We start to see how they're just stories. You know, and our pain body is just a construct, you know, of places in life where we went into resistance or we had a response, and then we become triggered, and we, you know, everybody is in this kind of like constant emotional kind of kerfluffle. And that sucks a lot of juice, and it's all just noise in the signal, and it's not necessary. And it's possible to just settle it all down and kind of find your flow and conserve energy and, you know, be a greater force for good and service in the world, because you're not expending all this energy and drama and suffering, you know, that isn't even necessarily needed.
Right, and I think a big key to that then, of as the field opens and clears, is breath, and how we use our breath, how we can ground our body with our breath. And I know you talk a lot about the chakra system, and talk about, as you're working with the forks, that you're balancing, let's just say there's energy missing in chakra 1, there's not enough rooting or grounding in somebody, and you're working with bringing more of that natural harmonic of the root chakra back into the body. I'm curious also how that is in relationship to the nervous system. So does the chakra system, as you balance it, how does that relate to our nervous system? All part of this, what we're talking about, how one sustains the fabulous energy of what the tuning forks are doing.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of components in that. So one is breath. Breath is a huge part of biofield tuning. And before we work with anybody, we teach them how to breathe into the area that's behind and below the navel, and then to exhale down their legs and out their feet, or to exhale out their tailbone. And to start becoming more connected to the ground. Part of being electric beings is that we want to be grounded, and we want to be in electromagnetic equilibrium with our environment. And a lot of people, you know, when we find these places in the field that are frozen, where they, you know, at some part in their biography where they went into resistance, and kind of hunkered down and locked up. There's no breath in these places. And so part of finding these memories in the field is also opening the breath, is breathing into these areas and liberating the breath. And in that liberation of breath, also connecting to ground. So that's a really central part of what we do with this kind of breathing and centering and grounding. When I'm giving a session, when my practitioners are giving a session, we do a lot of this very audible exhale. And I recently read that when you have a long audible exhale like that, it discharges the vagus nerve. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what happens to us as practitioners is get into that information of that story, and it informs our system. So we'll feel nauseous, or we'll feel sad or anxious, you know, we'll get that information. And so, you know, in order to not take it on or bring it home, we discharge it through a grounding breath. So to me, a really huge part of being free, of being healthy, is having your diaphragm be free, is having your traps be free, is having your breath be really free and open. Because all of our emotions kind of reside in our diaphragm and our breath. It's just one simple thing to pay attention to, is to notice whenever you're holding your breath, and just breathe in the belly and exhale down into the ground. So, you know, the chakras and the nervous system, I kind of have a hard time with the word chakras. You know, they're on the cover of my book, Tuning the Human Bioflow. I didn't want them to be. You know, those are Sanskrit symbols. I don't have a background or education in Vedic anything, you know, I know peripherally. The reason why chakras even came into the equation for me was because my very first set of tuning forks were C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and they said use them on, you know, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh chakras. And so that became the model that I started working in, just because that was what the instructions said. What's interesting to me is that every place where there is a chakra, there is a nerve plexus. So there's clearly like a concentration of nervous system activity there in that plexus. And it seems to me like when you're moving energy around the field, which we can do because the tuning fork becomes like a magnet, the vibrating tuning fork can actually move the energy, which is stunningly strange, you know, to feel like you're using the tuning fork like a magnet moving iron filings. But it's a very distinctive feeling, like it's stuff, like you can feel the stuffness of it when you move it, the resistance and the different consistencies too. Different kinds of energy feels different ways, which is really interesting. But so, you know, the word chakra, the concept chakra, it's one of those things that I find for people who are skeptical, it sets off what I call their woo bells. And, you know, it's like something, if you say that word, it's immediately woo woo. And I try to avoid words like that. You know, I do my best to try to make this sort of neutral, because it's really a whole new territory from a Western perspective. I mean, certainly from a Western perspective, it's been mapped and it's understood and all that. But, you know, in this time and place right now, what we're working on is there a way to address everything that we're working with from an academic and scientific viewpoint and language and system? You know, so that's part of my ongoing research, is that kind of being in that interface of you know, this sort of frontier or alternative, you know, silent healing thing with the medical world, with the academic and scientific world, because the biofield holds so much potential. I mean, it just blows my mind what I've been able to do blindly with a tuning fork. You know, like when we understand it more deeply, there's no end of exploring to do here.
I know I find like in the sound experiences that I'm doing with, whether it's with the cancer patients or in meditation groups, when I'm using the tuning fork on their feet, on their hands, they have a very strong reaction to it. It helps them to, let's say we talk about the electromagnetic field or the electricity that you talked about in the body. It helps them it lights that up. It lights that up and it helps them to ground. It helps them to feel what you were saying also, the breath flowing through the soles of the feet, coming up through the soles of the feet, and really the body in one big toric flow. And also for me, exploring people's voices is exactly how I'm teaching this whole human awareness, that they feel themselves as the breath, connected to the earth, connected to heaven. And it's huge. It's
a nice place to hang out, that zone. Just Yeah.
It is the place to hang out, and it's not woo-woo. I mean, yes, of course, in our Western world, we talk about chakras. Of course, people can relate more if we talk about the nervous system, but it's not woo-woo. And I have more and more people who are in the field of science, engineers, scientists, after a session, they'll say, my goodness, I thought all this sound work was woo-woo, and it's not. I'm feeling something, I'm experiencing something. There is a shift in my body, and that's also going back to, is it the nervous system itself that is holding the shifts for people, that is making the tuning the biofield, making it sustainable?
Well, that's a really good question. I mean, it's our memory. It's our mind. It's our mind is like a magnetic field around us. That's the way I see it. And magnetic might not be the best word. One of the things that I'm doing actually, starting on Tuesday, in just 2 days, I am starting to interview people for my podcast, which is called Think Electrically: Health, Life, and the Universe from an Electric Perspective. And we're going to start to learn more about electricity. It's not an easy thing. If I ask somebody, if I were to ask you to define it, it's like most people just come up blank. It's like, I don't even know how to define it. And the deeper that I've gone into my studies on it, the more I discovered that nobody really knows what it is, and that there's a lot of different language and different words and different stories about it, but it's really enigmatic. And my next book is called Raise Your Voltage, and it's about health from an electric perspective, and how it's really a game changer when you start thinking about your health electrically. And sound, definitely, it does. Like what you were saying, if you go to a concert and, it's really good music and you're dancing, it pumps up your energy, right? So sound does increase your inner light, increases your inner electricity. And I think we're only just beginning to understand, what the potential is there.
I mean, it's raising the vibrational frequency on the cellular level. And I mean, I will have that conversation with anyone now, because I came from the deepest of grief to an experience of, at the cellular level, being filled with light and a high, joyous vibration now that feels very anchored. And what have I been doing the last 3.5 years? That's why this series, it's working with people like you, exploring the avenue of sound, which has always been my language from the time I'm a little girl, exploring with my own voice, what has happened? Because it's not woo-woo, Eileen. I should be in my bed underneath the covers in grief. And my life isn't that anymore.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the power of sound to heal. It is the most ancient healing modality, and it works. And, and it's physics. I mean, ultimately what we're looking at is physics. It's resonance and entrainment. It's shifting the vibe. It's, it's interesting in biofield tuning. We don't use the term raising vibration. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I talk more about how we want to raise our voltage. We want to raise the actual amount of electric current running through our system. Because I think sometimes when you talk about the idea of raising vibration, there's a kind of effort to lift, as if, I need to go higher, and higher is better, and I'm going to avoid anger and rage and jealousy and all those base emotions, and I'm going to try to raise my vibration. In biofield tuning, we talk about like voltage from the core, from your own inner sun, and how you become more radiant from the inside out. So more dropped into that place we were just talking about, nowhere to go, nothing to do, that just being place, and being radiant, like effortlessly radiant from that center place. And there's, so there isn't this kind of like, I got to raise my vibration. I just raise my voltage by being very centered and very radiant. And it's a different distinction, but the way that it feels in your body when you kind of think about it is really different. And in that centered radiance, there is joy. It's just a natural experience of it, but it isn't something that can lift and lower. It just kind of it can strengthen or weaken, right? And the more harmonious we are, the more effortlessly radiant we become. So it's just a differentiation that I like to make, because I also find with the idea of raising vibration and that kind of lifting up sort of feeling that goes with it, A lot of people who've had trauma respond to that by disassociating, by kind of going up and out. And I think when we talk about ascending or, going to the fifth dimension, there's this kind of like up and out of the body, kind of put on the horizon sort of action with that. And I think when we really want to be present and we want to be grounded, we want to be in our bodies, we want to be now. And it's just much easier to get into that place when you think about raising your voltage. At least that's the way I see it. What do you think?
I mean, I'm smiling because for me, in the end, the somatics don't matter, because it's the feeling tone and it's what I'm able to sustain in my body. And so working with certain clients or students, some will respond more. And I guess I've never associated raising my vibration with coming out of my body. It's more just this feeling of electricity, this feeling of a shimmer, and this feeling at the same time that it's very anchored and very, let's just say, using like the intercostal and the transverse abdominis muscles, it's lower in the body, and then that anchors down in the pelvis floor and down through the legs and the soles of the feet. So I've not ever thought about raising my vibration as reaching for something.
Yeah, that's good. And so the way that you're experiencing it is, what you're saying is definitely what I'm referring to too. Just that feeling of being lit up. My friend Tiffany Barsotti calls it atoms up, where all your molecules are kind of in that kind of place where you're just really letting the life force come through you. I just, as a researcher and as a writer, I tend to think about semantics and, what people are responding, and also just what I've seen in my clients. But, ultimately we're talking about the same thing. I just get nitpicky around words.
Well, words have power. It's very important. But I understand, with each different student or client, everybody is going to respond differently. It's like there's no one size fits all. There's no particular vocal exercise. There's no particular bowl. There's no particular tone that is the one fix it for everybody. It's really working. It's working, as you said, on finding where are those disharmonies, where are the discordant pieces, and how do we bring those back to what we're talking about, the natural state of harmony in the human body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and what's amazing to me is how readily the human body goes back into harmony. It's not that hard to tune a human body. And you can learn it in 8 days. Through Biofield Tuning Inc. But it's our birthright. And what gets in the way, what I find more than anything, is people's attachment to their mind viruses that have programmed into them that they're not worthy.
I love how you describe, I love your terminology in terms of technology and informatics in terms of like computer science. I love how you word that.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that, it's a good analogy, because what I find is that most people are riddled with mind viruses. They're just full of them and they believe them. They think that they're self. There's all kinds of mind viruses that keep people poor, in poverty consciousness. And there's no end of, stories that you can tell there about money not being spiritual, or, money being evil, or people who have money are evil, or, they're all just programs. And they're not true. I see so many kind, good people who have made power and money evil things, and so they remain moneyless and powerless to affect change in the world. What we really need is people who are good and kind, who will receive money and power and then in turn use it for good. So carrying around that kind of mind virus doesn't serve you, doesn't serve the planet, doesn't serve anything. It's just noise in the signal. That's all that it is. And when we clear out that noise, we connect with our own essential infinite abundance anyway. Because when we get rid of the stories in the pain body and all of that noise settles down, we tune into the universe. We recognize that we are part of the whole universe, the one song, and we're connected to it. The electricity that's in me is the same electricity that's in the sun, that's in everything, and it's all one electricity. It's all one light, and I'm worthy of, whatever power, energy, abundance that comes from my being connected to everything. Abundance is a feeling of being connected to everything and knowing that you're all of that. And that's where true abundance comes from. We can't connect to source. We can't connect to the abundance around us if we're all riddled with, fleas, which is basically what most people are suffering from. You get all these tangles and they get bugs in them. Just live in a state of discomfort and disconnection that can be shifted.
I mean, first of all, thank you for creating this nonprofit that is documenting and researching more and more things in this field. That's fabulous. Thank you for that. And how can you give our viewers, how can they use your work to truly help themselves? Is there a way to do that simply through your book? Do they need to join class? Of course, with your new podcast coming up, but how can the viewers really help to change their lives through your work?
Well, there's a number of ways. One is that I just invented this new product that's called the Sonic Slider.
I love it. I have it.
And it's a tuning fork. We say that it's for personal and professional use, but having played with frequencies for a long time, it's 22 years now, I've had a lot of prototypes made over the years of different forks. I've played with different sets and kind of have a good sense of tuning forks and what they can do and how they feel. And I decided that I wanted to make one to use on the face, to just kind of help to kind of iron out and smooth out the face and, sculpt and sort of try to iron out lines. And it's something that I played with over a decade ago, and I knew that it could work, but I was just busy doing other things. And this year I'm turning 50 and I was like, oh, I better try to figure that one out. So I had this prototype made and I started using it on myself. And in the beginning I was very religious, using it on my face all the time. And I'd come into meetings like this and my friends and my coworkers would be like, Eileen, you look different. What are you doing? And I was like, aha, I'm using the Sonic Slider. And so that was really cool. I used it for a few months on myself, just, discovered it worked, sent out prototypes to a bunch of people. They played with them, reported the same thing. So we brought it to market. But then in the end of December last year, I decided to start using it on my body just to see what would happen. And in a 5-week period, I actually dropped from a size 6 to a size 2. Just dropped like a stone. I actually had to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe because I'd started off as an 8 and I went from an 8 to a 6 just using it on my face and neck without changing anything else. And then when I used it on my body. So now not many people have had as dramatic as an experience as me with weight loss, because I was really mostly water weight. And basically what you do is you activate this fork and you just rub it all over your whole body. Just your legs and your tummy and your neck and your head. You just rub it all over, always stroking towards the heart, kind of like dry skin brushing. And so what I observed was that it seemed to break up fascia knots and it got rid of my cellulite. It with the affirmation that I had the body of a teenager. And so the combination of using this particular frequency, doing it regularly, and affirming that completely changed my body. And it's just amazing. And I use it for 5 minutes a day. You don't even have to do it for very long. The frequency is the 12th harmonic of the Schumann resonance. So that's 7.83 kind of Earth's heartbeat vibe multiplied times 12, and you get a frequency of 93.96. And I had an image in a cymatics video, a cymoscope, seeing the frequency in water, and it's really cool. It looks to me like it encourages healthy cell division, and so it seems to have this youthifying effect on people, and it's so easy. So I actually developed a 21-day series of every 7-minute video comes in your email once a day. Is me talking about nutshell summaries of all the health hacks that I've learned over the years to kind of shortcut health. I'm call myself Shortcut Shirley. I'm always looking for minimum investment, maximum return, especially when it comes to food and exercise and things like this. So, not only has using this gotten rid of this water weight that I kind of always struggled with, in short order, but it got rid of cellulite, and it also toned my muscles, which is really pretty wild, because I think a lot of people, if you've had trauma, especially first, second chakra, pelvic kind of trauma, sexual, whatever, there's a tendency to not really be present in your body. And when your consciousness isn't embodying your body, your muscles don't fire. And so just by sending this mechanical energy, this vibration into my deep gluteal muscles, my deep abdominal muscles, they actually started firing. For the first time in my life, I never really, yoga, weightlifting, nothing ever got those muscles firing, but this tuning fork actually has, which is really pretty wild. So it's helped me to be a lot more embodied and just get energy flowing. So we did a pilot program with this 21-day series, and everybody said the same thing. I feel lighter, I feel more even keeled, I feel springy. That was one of the things that I experienced, was like springiness, which is a wonderful thing to feel. Like, who doesn't want to feel springy, especially when you're 50 or over. So,
and how many minutes a day are they using the fork in this 21-day program?
Yeah, it's a 7-minute video. So every day the video is 7 minutes, and you can do it just once, or you can do it, morning and evening. So it's still less than 15 minutes. And, nobody can say I don't have 7 minutes. Like, nobody can say that. I can hear some of you saying I don't have 15, but the key is consistency. It's in using it every day. And what I was finding was that my early users weren't getting in the habit of it. That's why I created this 21-day series. So it's really a way to bring the power of sound home for you. And then each, video is it's a lesson. And it's a way of starting to look at life differently when you start looking at it electrically. And so there's all 21 different topics that get you thinking differently. So it's a truly transformative 21-day series for people. And it's affordable too. So that's one way. I think the best way really is to become a practitioner, because every time you give somebody a tune-up, you receive it as well. And you can be feeling a little off or a little funky, you're kind of in your stuff, and you give a tune-up and you're like, wow, you just feel plumb and square. And it really truly helps people to feel better, like your experience, I helped you to feel better. And that is really, really rewarding, that to help liberate people into their potential as human beings, to see the light come on in them and to see them start to claim their greatness is so, so rewarding. So that's an option. I also have all of these archived and occasionally do live audio like healing sessions where I do a tune-up over an empty table and record it. And people tune in live, or they tune into the recordings. And, they claim to get benefit from it. I think it's kind of weird. But my practice became so busy that I couldn't keep seeing people one-on-one. And so I tried it as an experiment, and people said it helped. And so, they keep tuning in. And so I think, they claim that it helps. So I put myself in every single one of this, which is interesting. And I've done over 250 now on like the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, like every gland and organ, every chakra, every system. And, I find them beneficial conducting them too. So there's a whole big library of things like that at my website. And so is the sonic slider. So that's at biofieldtuning.com.
Excellent. Curious too, when you just mentioned, what is your experience with the tuning forks and the endocrine system?
Well, it's really interesting. I did a group session recently on autoimmune disorders. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know what my best point of entry was to work on autoimmune disorders. And so in biofield tuning, we use a pendulum to help us figure out the best angle of approach to any particular session. And I was directed to work on the pituitary gland. And I thought, isn't this interesting? Because we're so pineal focused, right? It's all about the pineal. And in all the years that I had been doing tune-ups, I'd actually never worked on the pituitary gland on an individual or in a group. And it was a very intriguing session. And it left me wondering, like, if the pituitary gland is the master gland that's directing all the other glands and that's directing our endocrine system, like, why don't we talk more about that? Why don't we have more people doing healing on the pituitary gland? Why isn't there a fork for that? I know they've got pineal forks. And when I finished that session, I felt this like white light come on, sort of, the pituitary sits sort of at the interface of your face and your brain, kind of back in, there. And this white light just came on there, and I felt such a sense of clarity. And not only did I feel like clarity and lightness from it, but when I had to go to the grocery store after the session, and what I found was that it was easy for me to effortlessly, because sometimes I have to work at it, feel kind of compassionate towards every single person that I encountered. Like I had hit that kind of Zen spot of like total acceptance of everyone. And that's a really nice place to go. I mean, that's the grooviest place to get to, really. And it's not easy to get to that place where you're just kind of in that sweet spot and you really truly feel kindness for all things. So that, and one of the things that I've observed just regarding autoimmune disorders is that, and the endocrine system, hormonal things, is that most people who have like so-called autoimmune disorders are divided within themselves. Meaning that there's a sense of self, but then there's like an inner critic or a construct that is not self. And there's a kind of continual loss of energy around this inner division. And then that inner division gets projected outward. And, we see this country, right, that is so very divided. And that division really begins inside people. And really everybody that I've ever treated who suffered from things like chronic fatigue, Hashimoto's, lupus, Lyme, blah, 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 goes on and on and on. One, they're just suffering from a low battery. Their battery is really, really low. And, all of the juicing in the world isn't necessarily going to bring your battery back up. Your battery goes up when you start to follow your natural inclinations, when you start to speak your truth, when you start to allow your emotions to flow through you instead of suppressing them. All of these things help to bring our battery meter up.
And that's the theme of your podcast that's coming up, is the electricity in the body, correct?
Yes. And for me, what I find is it's so much easier. It makes health so much easier because, a lot of times in this sort of chemical mechanical world, if we're sick, if we have chronic fatigue, if we have Hashimoto, whatever, you go looking for something to put in your mouth. Right? I mean, it's sort of like eat more greens or take this supplement, or when we work with sound, influencing electricity in our body, we don't have to buy supplements. We don't have to, eat more vegetables. I actually eat very few vegetables, which people are horrified. I've been telling people this lately, and, I really eat meat, cheese, and bread. That's a really big part of my diet. Like I love a good egg sandwich on a bagel. And, and that tends to horrify people, they're like, oh my God, you need to eat, like everybody, my husband, my kids, everybody's like, eat more vegetables, Eileen. But I've been experimenting, like how few vegetables can I actually get by on? And then, sometimes I crave them. And when I crave them, I eat them. But, the belief that eating clean is going to correct your health is really missing a really big component. And that is largely your emotional management, managing your truth, your state, your feelings, your electricity. It's just a completely different way. And once you get it and you start to understand what makes you feel more energized, and you start to think that way, and you stop saying things like, I have lupus, I have Hashimoto's, you don't want to say things like that. What you really need to say is, I have a low battery, I give more than I receive, I discharge more than I recharge, and I need to start doing something about that.
And that's a more healthy way of articulating the story.
Yeah.
It's a healthy way, a way that helps to move us to wholeness again without hanging in the frequency of the story.
Exactly. Because you get to the point where the story doesn't matter. Like you just don't even care about the story. Who cares about the story? Like enough with the story. The story's so freaking boring. And ultimately, the story can be worked through. Like we don't need to go talk about it for years and years. We can find it in the field, we can discharge it, we can liberate the energy, and on you go. Like solve the problem and get out there and be the superhero that you are. Stop wallowing around in the stuckness of, probably something that's been going on for generations in your family.
Yes. I want to return for a moment to what you shared at the beginning about your voice and feeling at the beginning that when you were a young woman that you were tone deaf and that you couldn't use your own instrument to express yourself fully. And talking about, as we were speaking, music and the power of music to move your body, the rhythmic sense in music, the ability of music to open. And you were talking about, I'd love to sing more and I'd love to create. Would you share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah. Well, so, it's funny because people kind of think of me as the tuning fork lady. But I really harbor a secret desire. Like, I have that rock and roll fantasy thing going on in me. And, hanging out, teaching people tuning forks, it's all well and good. But ultimately, what I really love to do is to sing and to dance and to make music and, and to party. That's fun. And so I'm angling towards being involved in a musical production where we take everything that we've learned about the power of sound, the power of intention, our electromagnetic bodies, what it means to be coherent and empowered and whole and ultimately free, because that's what everybody wants is freedom, whether it's relational freedom or financial freedom or health freedom. We all just want to be free, right? And freedom is a feeling. It's a feeling. And that feeling can be construed through music. And I feel like the human voice is just so much more powerful, orders of magnitude more powerful than a tuning fork. And certainly many human voices together are so powerful. And so the vision is to create an anthem that many people feel resonant with, and get many people singing this song at the same time, and create a warp in the matrix to create, because sound really does have that, on an individual level in our own bodies and in a space, and certainly in the collective. And we've had so much divide and conquer, and where we're all connected is in our pain and our suffering. There's a common denominator with all of us. There's a nerve that resonates in everyone. And I think that music has the power to tap into that and to connect that and also really empower people. It's very unfortunate that our current modern music is so dreadful and disempowering when there's so much potential in music to really awaken and enliven and empower people. And so, that's where I'm headed. I might take a few years to get there because, like you mentioned, I have this institute and we're doing scientific research. We're also doing outreach where we're bringing tuning forks and training of a really kind of simple version of biofield tuning into at-risk and low-income populations. We just started in Kingston, Jamaica, and that was an incredible experience. We launched it the week of my 50th birthday and delivered 42 sets of tuning forks and training to people in the inner city in Kingston, and it was just so amazing to see. So we're going to be heading back there. And then our next stop is the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, where they've been losing a lot of youth to suicide. And then from there, we want to go on and cover the world. So so we've got a lot going on, but somehow or other, I'm going to fit that rock and roll fantasy in there somehow.
The tuning fork lady is going to be on the rock and roll stage.
Yeah.
So, thank you for your service. I mean, that's come up so often now in the conversations in the series of how people are bringing community together, are sharing their gifts with sound and music to uplift communities, especially youth. That's been an underlying message in the series. So it's wonderful. I wasn't aware of that part of what you were doing. Thank you very much for that service.
Yeah. It's really heartening. It feels really good. And I've always wanted to do this work for free, but you can't in the world. We got to trade our time for money. And so, in October, we raised money from our community and we went and we did this, free of our own time. And it just felt really great. It felt really, really great to do and to know that that's rippling out. And, we want to go to refugee camps. We want to go and we want to work with at-risk populations that can't afford this. Certainly we have a first world model where we train and, we also, you asked ways that people could experience this. One way that I forgot to mention is we have hundreds of certified practitioners all over the world and some really wonderful practitioners out there. And those are also, you can find them, there might be one in your neighborhood at biofieldtuning.com as well.
Bravo, Eileen. It's very inspiring, all that you've developed since the last 22 years and where it's going. It's exactly where we're going with this series, all of us in our own unique ways. And it's uplifting, whether we want to say we're raising the vibrational frequency of the planet, or how did you name it? If we, how did you name it?
We're raising our collective energy. You know, we're raising our light. We're becoming lighter. That's another way to kind of look at it. You know, as we drop the heavy baggage, we become lighter, and we bring more light to the world. You know, it's pretty dark times that we're in, and the way that it gets lighter is with each of us individually increasing our own light. And it's not that hard to do. And it's not spiritual, and it's not woo woo. I mean, it's biological, it's electrical. Like it's not, you have a light body, and that is scientifically based, you know, so you can really truly raise your wattage, your voltage, and become brighter and make a bigger difference by doing so.
Is there a last, something you'd like to share with our viewers? Anything where your heart is going even further, your vision?
Well, what comes to mind when you say that is water. You know, water is an extraordinary vehicle for healing. And water, you know, there's heavy water and there's light water. And we can turn heavy water into light water with our own intention and our own minds. Even just holding a glass of water and sending love and light into it, you can change the way it tastes. We do this in my classes all the time. And, you know, so many people are so programmed with these mind viruses that they're constantly telling the collection of molecules that they're currently stewarding, you know, these molecules of earth that we're constantly exchanging with our environment, and remembering how suggestible water is, right? The work of Emoto, and certainly other people have shown that when you tell water it sucks, it kind of puddles. It doesn't turn into a beautiful crystal. It's like, ugh. And so, you know, we're creating heavy water in the world by telling ourselves we suck. And then you pee that water out, and you've just imprinted that water with the belief that it sucks. And that becomes pollution. You are perfect. You are just a collection of molecules of creation. And your water is 99% of the molecules in your body. So everything you tell yourself, you're telling the water that you're just hosting. Think about that. I mean, this is really true. And it's very, very important that we speak kindly to ourselves, that we treat ourselves with kindness and respect. Again, looking out in the world where we see all this lack of kindness, this lack of civility, well, that's what's going on in people's own minds. And that doesn't help the planet at all. So I would just, you know, treat the water, treat the collection of starlight and earth that you are with great dignity and kindness and respect and love. And radiate that energy out into the world around you. And let yourself feel the radiance of that come back to you too, because that's just the nature of life, is that. So to just be more mindful, right, of being kind to yourself, and then that just happen. You'll just become kind to others. And it will happen. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Eileen. At this most beautiful time of the year, this December, as we move towards the solstice, thank you for bringing your light and your blessings, and continue everything you're doing. It's so healing for the world, for ourselves as individuals, and thank you so much for the time and the effort and the excitement and the passion that you've put into developing this very special work that you're doing. Thanks for sharing with us in the sacred science of sound.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks a lot. This is great.
We will see you very soon.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Eileen.